You know, I mean, maybe I should have kept this thing up here.
There you go.
Laugh at that. But then, of course, hey, welcome, Scott. The laugh track sometimes sneaks up on you. So that's why I keep this down. It just kind of goes off here. But make sure you take some time to like and share and subscribe and do all that cool stuff. And don't forget about these publications here. We had some conversations recently about all kinds of unpleasantness about the financial realities of our congregation and churches in general. And it would really be helpful to support me, support us in that way if you can. But Rule 5. Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Look, he's laughing already. This is a serious rule.
I know, probably the first one that he said was serious.
Yeah, and you're laughing at it. What do you think about it? What does this bring to mind? Why are you laughing?
The impossibility of your kids doing something that you do not like.
Yeah, well, sometimes there are things your kids do that you don't like, but I mean, you're in a different phase of life right now, right? So your kids are adults,
Right.
On their own, mostly. As much as anyone can hope for at their age, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think what he's getting at is really, the early years,
Right.
Obviously, your kids will do something that you dislike at some point, but insofar as they are under your care and your training, don't let them do things that make you dislike them.
Yeah, I guess teach them or try to train them to do things that are good for making friends or those types of things.
That's a huge part of it. He goes into a lot of detail, a lot of different scenarios and things, but the idea here is if you dislike something that your kid is doing, odds are someone else is going to dislike it. And someone is going to really dislike it if it's not their kid. Right? So you might tolerate a lot because it's your kid, but you tolerating it doesn't actually help them. And it certainly doesn't help society, right? Because eventually that unlikable kid with unlikable behavior is thrust on society when you're not around anymore. Either the child's an adult or you're gone, you die at some point, right? Generally, we don't live forever apart from Jesus, and that's something where we get this delayed thing, right, where you still go into the ground, and then we're waiting for Jesus to come back. And anyway, I've seen so many people these days that just we have the CDC here, the Child Care Center, we've got community center, we've got people in the church, we've got family, we've got friends, and more there is this idea that you need to be your kid's friend, and you want your kid to like you, right? Parents tend to be more concerned with that. There's this gentle parenting trend, this idea that let me say this. When I was researching this last week.
That's another story.
Yeah, another story. Scott had a nice trip. I was ready for action. But when you look into gentle parenting, there's I found this page where the person that was sort of behind this put, here are 10 myths or 20 myths about gentle parenting. Mm-hmm. And she's like, it ain't that. So what most people say is gentle parenting, and the way people look at parents and see what they believe to be gentle parenting is not officially gentle parenting in the eyes of the person who started this movement, whatever it was. Right? So I got that disclaimer, sort of put that out there, that technically this is not really gentle parenting, what I'm about to say. But basically, just constantly like, now, dear, that's not okay. And please stop. And, just maintaining this perfect, like peaceful, quiet thing, never getting upset, raising your voice, purely reasoning with the child, essentially, that there's no discipline at all. No, what's the right word I'm looking for here? You're like, where you don't ever sort of contradict your child or oppose your child, right? Like you're just along for the ride to guide them in the way that they develop and they become and blossom, whoever it is that they're supposed to be. You're just there. You're not supposed to actually mess up the process or anything, because that's what we do. That's what we do. That we mess it up. Kids are perfect, and if you just leave them alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Baloney, right? And I found like it resonated. This chapter really resonated with me, because there are people that refuse to admit that their kids are evil. And it's more and more prevalent today than ever before, this idea of sort of the perfection of childhood. That is a myth. Kids are evil because they're human. And humans are evil because Jesus said so. and just look at the world.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's sort of the foundational thing that he's getting at in the chapter, I think early on in the chapter, that you got to guide the kids. If you don't, they will naturally get worse. Unguided, they actually get worse. And if you let your child do things that you dislike, hit you, disrespect you, do all these different things, then they'll go out into the world and other people will be like, what's up with your kid? And their playmates and their kids at school and all that will be like, what's up with this kid? And they'll stay away. And it will become this downward spiral of dissociation from others, a lack of relationships and community, and it sort of feeds on itself. And, that is going to give them a path that will be far worse than if you would have done the right thing initially, done the hard thing, fought those battles with, he's got a few, he's talking about a neighbor kid or something that they had in there that wouldn't eat. And the mom was just like, and then she picks him up and the kid is all happy and everything because they made the kid eat, but not made they didn't like open up the kid's mouth and shove it in, coaxing the kid,
positive
reinforcement, but not giving up and not letting the kid get away with the bad behavior, right? Taking that effort to train them the way that they should go so that when they're all adult, they won't depart from it. Not just speaking about following Jesus, just life. So,
yeah, you need to, was it the things you learn in the sandbox or you learn in kindergarten or the things that...
Everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a coworker that said just recently to me that you go to some of these meetings at work and you realize the people that didn't learn the rules in kindergarten. She goes, we just have way too many of them around here.
Well, and that's the problem. More and more, we're getting more and more adults that have been through a childhood that did not discipline them.
Yeah, I remember, well, at my age growing up, kids are now elevated to like such a high level. They're like up here and it's everything you do is to, you're satisfying the kids or, trying to do things for them and all that, which is, good at its place. But when I grew up, it was like we were the kids. And there were parents.
Shut up.
Yeah, definitely. You were, you know, lack of a better term, the second-class citizens in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when we went on vacations or, you know, took a trip or whatever, it wasn't anything elaborate, but Dad decided where we were going. And we went along for the ride. And you better be happy about it, because otherwise it's going to be a miserable few days.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, yeah, where now it's, yeah, and I know I'm guilty, or, you know, we were guilty of that a little bit. It's indulging the kids a little bit too much on, you know, maybe more of what they wanted to do on family trips instead of necessarily what, you know, maybe we wanted to do. But anyway, yeah.
Well, and actually I think what I would say, just based on the chapter, and I don't know that he really tackles this specific thing that you just described, but that was actually more loving for the kids. The Lord disciplines those whom he loves. And in life, there is a hierarchy, and it's not like the patriarchy stuff that everyone gets all up in arms about. It's just there is a hierarchy. There is authority. You got to respect that authority. And one day you'll be that authority if you're not stupid, you know, and you don't get yourself killed before then. You got to discipline the kids. You can't let them have whatever they want. You can't, I mean, there's so many things that go into this. But discipline is love. Teaching them the right way is love. Not letting them get everything they want is love. I mean, God doesn't give you everything you want. Right?
All right.
And that's actually what's behind the story that he tells about this neighbor kid, that here's this neighbor kid who's just like clearly not happy, grumpy, all these different things. And the mom essentially delivers him to them and says as much. Like, oh, he won't eat. Like, what do you mean he won't eat? Like, of course he will. Like, no, he won't eat, you know. And of course they put in the time and the energy to do that. And when they do, the kid lights up and he becomes a kid, a happy kid, a kid who's loved because somebody took the time to do this, to teach this, you know. The rewards are for the people that are put in the effort. The reward is not when you're too scared to be tough on your kids. That makes them hate you and despise you. That's what we actually see. And it's because they don't feel actually loved. They can't maybe express that. They don't understand that. And that's what was going on with his mom. He actually, you know, goes into this whole thing about there are parents who really sort of hate their child in one sense. They really don't love their kid. And that's why they give up on them and don't do what they need to do as parents. But then there are these parents, he's got a whole other section on like, they actually do want to release a tyrant onto the world. They actually, that's okay. Like, yeah. And he even says some of the most, I don't know what the term he uses, egalitarian, feminist, whatever, tear down the patriarchy people. Some of them are actually people that would be happy to let their child be the tyrant. Like, oh, well, my son can beat women up and my son can do that. And not just boys, girls too. They have this problem. But, you know, it's a real problem that people get a sweet joy out of, you know.
Letting the tyrant loose. Huh?
Yeah, well, there's, he goes into some, I think, great depth on the sociological realities of particularly boys, like why a woman would let a boy go out into the world to be like this. You know, the number of boys, men in the world, and the amount of, and why people tend to want boys more than girls in a variety of ways. There's cultural things, but, you know, biologically speaking, you know, one boy can create millions of heirs whereas a girl can only produce maybe 8 or 9.
Right.
You know, and so there's this evolutionary
Genghis Khan had how many?
He listed a few. Yeah, he's got like 1/8 of the Chinese population, or 1/16 or something, or his. Yeah, or 8-10% maybe is what it was, which is a lot. You know, that's a lot. Not that we're advocating that boys should go around doing that exactly, but there is this inner impulse in people to do this, and so he's trying to draw attention to it to get people to stop. Like, discipline your kids. Don't let them do anything that makes you dislike them, because if you dislike it, someone else will dislike it. It'll be bad for them. And holy cow, the capacity for humanity to be evil is way... He lists a couple of specific things. There's a page and a half or so where he's going through this and explaining this, and he talks about, hey, yeah, and this thing, but don't look it up because it's pretty awful. Like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Just to show the capacity for humans to be evil.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say your kid is evil. I tell my kids that, and I'm like, I say, stop it. Kids suck is sort of how I say it. Kids suck. And they laugh at me, and they like say it back. Or they have a problem with a kid. And I say, oh, well, I told you, kids suck. Or I don't even have to say it. I say, well, you know what I say. Yeah, I know. Kids suck. There you go. And that's why I work with you.
And kids so you don't. Kids grow up to be adults. And
adults are just big babies.
Mm-hmm.
And babies are just little adults. Like, we're exactly the same. There's no difference between us, really, except for the fact that we can articulate better, and we're far more dangerous. You know,
and a little bit of taking care of yourself. You can feed yourself and
self-reliance, independence.
Yeah, self-independent. You can do all that for yourself, I guess, as an adult. But the thing that he said, one thing he said in there was, which it kind of was really scary, is if you don't socialize your child by the age of 4.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost too late already, or it is too late, you know. And I was like, wow, 4? That 4 happens fast.
It does.
And it's like, I want to just hope that there's still some hope for people that are 4 years old and haven't had it yet, haven't had any instruction yet. But gosh.
Yeah. Well, and that's true. It is. I don't know if it's 4 exactly.
Yeah.
You know, maybe there's still hope after that. I mean, we're Jesus people, right? I mean, we are people of hope. So there has to be hope.
Right.
You know, Saul had to be an adult in his 30s-ish when he's on the road to Damascus, and wham, encounters Jesus. Total transformation. Right? So I think that's one thing that he's not necessarily bringing into the conversation. I think he is being realistic about what we see, that on the whole, if it's not dealt with, it's very problematic. And you see a lot of people. I had a challenge with the family that we were dealing with one of our ministries, and you know, it was this kind of pushback, like, oh, well, you know, if they were a little older, I'd be worried about this, but they're pretty young, you know.
Are they older than 4?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Much older than 4.
Yikes.
And even before this book, you know, I was convinced that it's those early years. It's from birth to 2 or 3 or 4. That's when you deal with it. And a number of years ago, when we had our first kids, when our kids were first being born, our oldest, we read a bunch of books on discipline, particularly because there was some extra effort required at times. So, like, James Dobson had a book, Dare to Discipline, which was just generally like, hey, you should do this. And if you don't do this, it doesn't get better. It gets worse. It gets harder. You will have that rebellious teenage phase because you didn't do it at 2 and 3. And I think a lot of people would maybe struggle with some of the things that he talks about, James Dobson talks about. But he had a great point. And his point very often was, it's really about getting them to do as you say. Like it's not all the things that we often get into these fights about. It's like that very first, that rebellion, that like I'm looking at you as a 2-year-old and going, no, I know what you want me to do. I totally understand it. And I'm just going to sit here and smile. And if all you do is just look at them and smile, oh, well, being a toddler again, you are sentencing them to a life of misery as well as the people that will have to deal with them and fix it. Because at some point they will learn that they have to obey authority. And they will either learn it from you or they will learn it from the police. Or they will learn it from, right?
Yeah. So authorities in school or teachers, principals.
And the older they get, the more difficult the consequences become. The more painful and life-altering the consequences become. So that was one of his big things. He had a number of things that really kind of stuck with us. But then there was another book, The Strong-Willed Child, which really just reinforced some of those things and then spoke to that particular audience of people that, hey, we know there's some kids out there that are just really ornery, like extra ornery, and it takes extra effort to deal with that. And our kids, there's definitely strong wills in all of them, but the benefit of dealing with the first one and running a tight ship is the rest see that and learn, right? So if you go easy on one, then it messes up the whole thing and it's hard to rein it back in, But I've said on many occasions, like, hey, I get it. I don't want you to be a pushover. We need strong-willed people in the world, but we need them strong-willed about the right thing, not about whether they get a Pop-Tart for dinner or not. It's got to be about what matters. And so again, if you're not training and disciplining in the right direction, they throw fits over things that don't matter. And they bend the world to their will instead of God's will, or, that's what they're trying to do. So, am I wrong? Is he wrong?
No, I think he's right. And I think he said in one of the videos that kind of accompanies this is that he thought he would get the most pushback from this chapter, but apparently he didn't, at least not up until that point. So it makes you wonder, who's watching and who's listening and why there wasn't, more pushback,
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's people like us, we've had enough conversations. You had no problem making your children's life difficult if necessary.
I tell you what, though, it just really isn't fun to do that stuff. I guess, everybody wants to kind of have it easy, but who wants to come home and have to do that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's, who wants to have to deal with that kind of thing? But sometimes you just have to do it,
Well, and for us, for me, yeah, I don't want to do that. But on the one hand, if I come home and I don't deal with that, I don't love my wife.
Right.
If I come home and I don't deal with that, I don't love them. Right? In some ways, it is them reacting, especially dads, to your absence. And the discipline is an opportunity to engage. Right? Of course, you'd rather engage over something else, but that's just the way it works. You don't get to choose that. It just is.
Yeah, and every kid, I think, has those moments. So you're not going to get through it without having the opportunity to do that type of thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if both of our kids did it or not, but I know at least one of them had the grocery store, the department store. I'm falling on the floor and I'm screaming and kicking for whatever reason. Couldn't tell you now, but I think everybody has those. Is going to have one of those moments, or yeah.
Yeah, but at 25 having that moment or 35, that's not. People will look at you crazy or call the police, right? Like there's a woman having a psychotic break in the middle of Walmart's groceries, like help. And you get yourself checked into a psychiatric facility for behavior like that, right? So you can't, it can't continue. So you got to find ways. In some ways, yeah, kids are kids, and you don't want to overreact, but you got to react. You got to deal with it. You got to, I would say, also be proactive. So there's a book by this guy, John Gottman. He was like the #1 marriage expert in the country, the world. And we studied some of his stuff in seminary doing pastoral counseling stuff, pastoral counseling class. And he could predict with his research facility. I think he and his wife were both counseling, psychologists, psychiatrists. They had this facility, this research program. They could predict with 95% accuracy whether a couple would be married in 5 years or not, whether they'd still be married or not. And when you read this book, it is the most, it's so ridiculously basic thing. He talks about this idea of the idea of bids is what he calls them, an emotional bid. So like you, in any relationship you have, there are these regular bids for emotional connection. Okay. And they could be the most simple thing to more serious, significant, obvious things. But let's say you walk into your house at the end of the day, your spouse is, maybe washing dishes or something at the kitchen sink, and you walk in and they say, "Oh, hey, how was your day?" Or just, "Hello, how you doing?" Some kind of, that's an attempt to connect.
Right.
And you can respond in 3 different ways. You can turn towards them, which is like, "Oh, it was good. How was yours?" So that's positive. That's good. You can turn away, which would be, I think, basically like you just ignore them and you walk past them, or maybe you're at the kitchen sink and your spouse comes by and just like pats you on the back, rubs your back or something, maybe doesn't even say anything, but that's a bit. And you can respond and you can say, "Oh, hey, how's it going? I didn't hear you come in," or whatever, or other ways, right? But that's a bid, and turning toward is to receive it, accept it, and kind of turn toward them and engage them and build that connection. You can turn away where you just sort of ignore them, basically, like don't say anything, don't respond. But then you can turn against them, which would be like, "Shut up." Like, "Who asked you? What do you care?" Right? Or, "Get the hell off of me." Like, "Don't touch me." That's combative. Mm-hmm. It is, in a way, actually interacting. And the fascinating thing is, if the couples that were most likely to be successful were obviously the ones that had a higher percentage, and I don't know all the specific numbers about that, but the higher percentage of turning towards, which obviously makes sense. Turning towards them, engaging them. But then when you look at turning away and turning against, they both tended to be bad for the relationship. But turning away, sort of the ignoring kind of no interaction, that ended things far more quickly than actually being combative. Like if you're fighting, at least you have something to fight about.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, I mean, at some point.
The honeymooners.
Yeah. Fighting is better than nothing. It really is. Not that it's good. I'm not recommending it, but at least there's something there. If you're with someone who won't even fight with you, I mean, there's nothing there.
Right.
And I think that's
when you buy a dog.
So how does that relate to kids? Well, I think there's going to be those antagonistic moments in every relationship, but are you putting in those positive bids also at other times along the way, right? How much of that is how much are you building the case that, hey, I do love you, and when I say stuff that really pisses you off, it's not because I'm trying to piss you off. It's because you're stupid and you're evil. I mean, you can't really say that, but that's what it is. You're stupid. You're an idiot. The word idiot is literally like you just don't know.
All right.
You don't know. You're ignorant. And I am, however many years experience I've got, I've learned, and something about becoming a parent flips a switch too. Like all of a sudden now you're the man, like you're the authority, and you sense it, and now you just view the world in a completely new way. And so you bring that sort of like, man, yeah, the world and my parents, and oh yeah, no, you're gonna, right? You got to bring that to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, that's the way I've always kind of viewed it. That I wanted to put in these positive things.
Right.
I didn't want to just live in the negative, the fighting and all that kind of stuff. And the same thing for mom. I said if dad comes home like you explained and doesn't want to deal with it, well, mom shouldn't be leaving it to dad.
Right.
For all day. Mom's got a role in this too. And if it's only one person, you're screwed. It's a team thing. That's a thing one thing that Heather and I have always focused on, that it's us against them. I mean, it's us against the devil. It's us against evil. It's us against, right? But it's us united front against them. It's not her against them. It's not me against them. I'd rather back her up even if I think she's wrong, unless it's really wrong, and we got to fix it. But I'm going to back her up as a reflex no matter what, and she's going to do the same to me because that's how it goes. Because like I tell them, y'all are going to be gone one day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
staying with her, right?
Yeah, she's stuck with me. I'm stuck with her. I mean, we got each other. We got to make this work past you. So there's another piece to it.
Yeah, it's definitely, I guess, when you say disciplining or that type of thing, you always think about the negative, the fussing part or punishing part. But yeah, you definitely need the positive side too, because that's kind of what he was saying in the chapter was that, when you did the reward, well, then you got the, you got the happy child who was ready to eat, And
the reward doesn't even have to be
just
that one story with the kid who wouldn't eat, the neighbor kid or whatever. I mean, he was just happy as a pig in slop because this woman cared about him.
Right.
And when he took in a mouthful of food, she went, yeah. And I don't think it was just her. It was like the whole family was in on this, trying to coax this kid into doing what he should do. Just the attention, celebrate. I mean, giving attention for positive things, it has to be part of it.
Yeah. Definitely.
It's not saying it's easy. It's
easy.
hard. Parenting's not for the faint of heart by any means.
I think, though, there's that it seems like, though, too, in society nowadays, is that even though people who do have kids may be trending toward, you know, the I forgot what you were calling it, but, you know, letting
gentle parenting.
That not the real gentle parenting, but the version, the messed up version. But it seems like, okay, they have those, but then, you know, it's being a parent seems to be, nobody wants that really. There's a lot of people don't even want that responsibility anymore. You know?
Yeah, well, that's been in the, you know, political conversation lately. You got a lot of people like, oh, I'm child free and happy. And so I would say that we need people to have people. Like, you got to have babies because, I mean, things can collapse rather quickly when you don't. And I know there are a few people, obviously J.D. Vance, vice presidential guy, got himself into some, you know, I don't even know all of it. I just know some headlines. I'm like, oh, goodness, you know. Elon Musk has got his, you know, effort to repopulate the world. Yeah. I don't know, 12 kids or something.
Yes.
But he's got a point that if you don't have kids, if you don't have enough kids, if you don't meet the replacement rate, which is not 2 kids, it's like 2.2, 2.1 kids, because, I mean, it's just replacement. That's not growth. Things go rather poorly very quickly. I mean, a civilization as we know it can collapse. And I think it is already kind of moving down that road. I think a lot of the trouble that we have getting service that we want and need, you know, medical stuff, there's just fewer people available for a variety of specialties. Some of that is because it's hard and people don't want to put in that effort. But it's also, I think, a reality that declining population. U.S. has less of a problem with that because of immigration. But you destabilize an entire society when you let millions and millions and millions of people from other places, other cultures come in without sort of becoming a part of what it means to be American. And actually, Jordan Peterson, there's a short on YouTube that I came across one time because, you know, we have this bizarre, like, well, if we have kids, we're like destroying the planet, we're taking up resources and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know where the talk was from or what the larger video was, but it was just a short, and he's like, it's about this topic. And he says, you know, people worry about the number of resources that a person consumes. And it's something like, you know, they consume this number of resources. I forget how he said it exactly, but and then he said, but what we don't often consider is how much a human being produces. And he said, a human being produces 70 times what they consume. And he said, and that's why the world is probably far wealthier today than it was when I was born. So he's like a baby boomer type, right? And just think about the innovation and things that are happening right now with AI, which may be scary in a lot of ways, but I mean, it's generating wealth. Like, there is a sense in which productivity and creativity and advancing in all kinds of different ways benefits society in infinitely incalculable ways, so that the resources that we have can be used more efficiently, and the way that we develop resources can be done even better, so that we have more resources. So it's, you know, like, there was one person I remember several years ago, a previous congregation, you know, he was probably about 70 at the time. This is maybe 10 years ago. And we were having this kind of conversation. Somehow it all came up in a Bible study, and people are asking me about it. And, you know, he just said, you know, we only had 2 kids because that's all we thought we could afford. You know, I didn't know I'd be making more money. I didn't know this. I didn't know that, you know, but We probably could have had more. We probably should have had more. And I think that is the thing that we often, we just think everything's going to stay the same. It's all static, and it's not. Of course, now I have 4 kids, and I'm broke, so I don't want anybody to get too excited. But here we are, right? We're still making a go of it. Things are still okay. We have our challenges, but there's a way. And sometimes you need that. Like, you don't become the person you could be, I don't think, without kids.
Right. I agree with that.
Because until you have somebody that is your flesh and blood, or not to say that it doesn't work for adoption or anything like that, until you have somebody that you love so much that you will be the best you can be and do everything you can to make sure that they have all that they need and all that kind of, until you have that, like, I got that to a degree when I got married. But there's just something about, like, man, I just want to be that dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't say this. I can't do this. I must do this. I must do that because I got these eyeballs on me. And what kind of a hypocrite would I be if, like, there's a different level of incentive or impulse or encouragement.
You were going to say insanity.
Well, there is that too. I'm sure I have reached levels that they do drive you insane. I mean, I totally get why people want nothing to do with this, but it is the most rewarding. It is the most important for civilization. We need people. So I do say this, like, people suck, right? Kids suck. People suck. But people are also what make the world the best it can be, right? So I don't usually just say people are evil and leave it there. Kids are evil and leave it there. No, they have this infinite capacity for evil. But they also have this infinite capacity for good and to bring productivity and innovation, all that kind of stuff, and blessings into the world. I got into some weird Facebook thing 10 years ago or more. Somebody was saying something about how Siri, I got to be careful. My phone and my watch might start trying to, but this talking thing on an iPhone, so we don't get interrupted here, wouldn't give people directions to abortion facilities. Like, they said, oh, hey, tell me where the closest Planned Parenthood is or abortion place. And, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know where. Like, it's something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, this person was upset about that. This is somebody I knew from high school. And it was just like a thing in the comments. People clearly that thought a lot like her and just, oh, man, these terrible people. That's so messed up, blah, 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 blah. And all I said was, well, Steve Jobs was adopted. So maybe he had some sort of, like, personal thing where, maybe he was okay with people being pro-choice, but he kind of felt like adoption was a really good thing and people should consider it. Like, it just blew up. And that post got deleted.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Sometimes the most simple things you can say.
Yeah, and especially because I was male, and
right.
was like, I just got really,
put your patriarchy away.
Yeah, put your patriarchy away. All I said was, he was adopted. But think about that. I tell that story because here's Steve Jobs. Here's this guy who created. I mean, what is Apple is a $3 trillion company. You know, they were basically bankrupt at one point after they fired him. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying everything he brought to the world was good, but, 2007, the iPhone moment, right? And all of a sudden, everything changes. Now, you could make a case that these things are evil and we should get rid of them. And maybe that's true, but he's still brought something to the world. There are lots of positives to these things as well, and the technology and the value that's been created and the wealth that's been able to be deployed for all kinds of people that benefit from that. It's an American company in the S&P 500. So if anybody has 401ks or pension plans, I guarantee they are invested in something like the S&P 500, an Apple type company, right? And so that's driven wealth for, you look at the returns in other places around the world, not so great. Steve Jobs took everybody to the moon. Not literally. That's helped. Elon Musk.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess he helped skew the average there, though, for all the Joe Schmoes that
amount to nothing.
To nothing. He helped to bring up that 70 times
Okay.
for the rest of us, right?
Yeah, so 70 times on average. What's the median?
Yeah.
2. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think it's quite that bad, but have kids and do the hard work. I mean, that's really what it is. You won't find anything more rewarding or beneficial for the world. Like, I mean, Christians, right? We're very wrapped up in politics these days. And, I think we should be involved. I'm not sure if it should take the shape that it sort of has. But you want to know how to change the world? Have kids and raise them right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this was a big Reformation revolution. When Martin Luther, who went into a monastery and was a monk because he thought that's what God wanted, that God would rather you be celibate and have no children and just hide off in a monastery forever. He eventually said, no, God is working through the office of father and mother. Like, that is a calling from God. And if you have that role, you have that calling. How do you know? Well, you have a kid. Now you're a father, you're a mother. You have a calling now. God works in the life of that child through you. And the Lord disciplines those whom he loves. So discipline the child, right? Maybe not as harsh as 15th, 16th century Luther parents, right? Because he had some issues with his parents who were a little rough on him. But train up kids, change the world.
Yeah, I was trying to think of a couple of verses, and that was one that came to mind. And
train up a child and the way he should go. We mentioned that one. Proverbs 22. I think Hebrews 12 is where you get the Lord disciplines those whom he loves.
There's the Proverbs also that spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yep.
That one. But, I mean, that sounds kind of harsh, so you probably have to look at that one in context.
Yeah, I don't necessarily advocate for rods.
Right. But
so Hebrews 12:4. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood, and have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as a son. And so endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children, for what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while, as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. So, there's a lot in there, and it's dealing with hardship. Like, Lord, why are you letting us endure this hard stuff? Well, God's trying to turn you into something. That's what the point of the passage is. He's doing something with you. But notice how it's completely assumed that a parent does this with their kids. And if they don't, it's because you're illegitimate. Or at least that's the sense that it starts to feel this weird awkwardness. Like you feel like an illegitimate child. You're not really a child. I mean, think about that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But isn't that what we see in the way kids sort of develop when they don't get what they need discipline-wise?
Yeah.
That's it, huh?
Yeah. I was trying to think of something, but it wouldn't. It's like, don't want to incriminate anything or anyone.
Yeah, well, there's that.
Including myself.
Yeah, well, you had said something discipline, punishment. I would say punishment and discipline are two different things. That punishment is just like straight up, I am going to take my frustration out on you because I can. Discipline is for a purpose, always. And so there are those moments where you can get to that mindset of punishment where you're just so ticked off. And, I found over time, there are a lot of times where I was more upset about my kid making my life difficult, and it wasn't really discipline. Or I was upset about my kids, making me look bad. That's not discipline. That's narcissism. Right? I mean, that's, and so as a parent, having those moments has made me, the discipline of the kids has actually made me a better person. I'm still very far from good, right? Jesus says, why do you call me good? No one is good except God. Jesus said that. So I'm not going to claim to be a good person. But
well, the other definition of discipline, when you think about discipline, if I'm a disciplined person, I guess it connotates that I'm doing the things that I need to do. Whatever that is, getting up in the morning and going to work and doing those types of things. So I guess when you're disciplining your child, you're teaching them how to perform, positively in life. So, yeah, I guess it doesn't, when it comes to parenting, you say discipline, you kind of think, oh, yeah, that means you're really getting after them because they were misbehaving or whatever. And, yeah, so.
Yeah, no, it's train up your child in the way they should go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. I mean, this is a life, living a life a particular way. It's not necessarily about beating a kid.
Right.
That's not at all what it's about. It's, can you include physical discipline or physical means in developing that discipline? I think you can. I think Jordan Peterson doesn't really illustrate anything like that. I think he does kind of wrestle with it, but he gives plenty of examples where like there was zero physical means used in that discipline, and it was effective. So it can be effective without it. I think James Dobson, reading back to those books, he thought that you need some level of it because you can't reason with them when they're real young. But he's got I was looking for minimum necessary force. English common law allows you to defend your rights, but only in a reasonable manner. Someone breaks into your house, you have a loaded pistol, you have a right to defend yourself, but it's better to do it in stages. What if it's a drunk and confused neighbor? Shoot him, you think, but it's not that simple. So you say instead, stop, I have a gun. If that produces neither explanation nor retreat, you might consider a warning shot. Then if the perpetrator still advances, you might take aim at his leg. And then he says, don't mistake any of this for legal advice. It's an example. A single brilliant practical principle can be used to generate all these incrementally more severe reactions, that of minimum necessary force. So now we have two general principles of discipline. The first, limit the rules. Okay, so that was actually one. The second, use the least force necessary to enforce those rules. So that was actually something I found pretty interesting. Limit the rules, because you don't want to overwhelm people, kids, with keeping track of things, and yourself, right? You got to keep track of this stuff. You make too many rules, it's going to be hard to keep track of, and man, you're going to make their lives miserable. And oh, by the way, biblically speaking, every rule just creates another opportunity for that sinful, rebellious Adam, old Adam in all of us, to say no. Right? I mean, that's what we all have in us. That's why I say we're evil, right? Because, hey, I need you to do X, Y, Z. No. Why not? I don't want to. I mean, like, you lose that a little bit over time, but it's still in all of us.
I mean, that's the thing you think of, but there's also the child that is more kind of a civil disobedient type. You say, okay, go to your room and clean your room, and they won't say, no, I'm not doing that. But they go to the room, they still don't clean it. They're not going to fight you over it.
Yeah.
But they're still not going to do it. Unless you go and check on them and say, no, you're not.
Accountability. Yeah. Discipline.
Right. Teaching them discipline. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just necessarily talking about that child that just, says, no, I'm not doing whatever every time. But, yeah, you got to watch the other ones too.
Yeah, just because they're not openly antagonistic doesn't mean that they're not also
evil.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. Passive aggressive still works. And actually, there's a couple of Bible passages I think that go into this, like, which is better for, a son, a father gives a command to one son and the son says, yes, sir, I'll do it, and then doesn't, or he gives a command to another, says, no, I'm not going to do that, and then he goes and does it anyway. Who did the will of the father? Mm-hmm. The one who did it anyway, even though he said no, right? So, it's not necessarily just throwing a fit that makes it the problem, right? I mean, it's not doing it, like failing to do what you are called to do. And right now, we are in this age of excessive compassion. Like, I really feel like we're there, and, a lot of people, like, especially politically, like, oh, well, compassion. Like, well, yeah, Jesus was compassionate, but Jesus also was really tough on people. And you can't really have a relationship with Jesus without accountability, without recognizing him as this ultimate source of accountability, and being a part of a community of Christians. Like, you can't just say, well, I'm going to do whatever I want. You just always have to tolerate me and accept me and forgive me. Yes, to a point, but if we love you, we will try to stop you. And if you take that poorly and say, oh, I'm not going to listen to you telling me that I should not be a jerk or not be evil, so I'm just going to leave. And then so we have this ongoing culture, this growing culture of just excessive compassion, which ultimately is actually not compassionate. Like, in the end, we think we're being compassionate, but we're actually not. I don't know if that makes sense. We're missing the accountability piece that Jesus regularly brought to his disciples. It didn't mean like he threw them out when they didn't get it right. It just meant that he was going to challenge them. And them sticking around was essentially saying, okay, I get it. You want me to be better. You're calling me to something higher. I'm not there yet, but I'll keep striving. And I'll walk with you wherever it leads. That's not the kind of compassion, supposedly, that we see today. The love that we see today. Today, it's like, as long as you never contradict me in any way, then you love me. And that's just simply not love.
Yeah, I think they're rebelling against the rules, which you can also be the person that follows all the rules and the big ones. You think, if I didn't kill anybody or rob a bank, I'm pretty good, Yeah. I wear the right clothes and do the right things, but yeah, so. Yeah, I don't think that's the way it's supposed to be, right? It's not all just, how would you say that, where you have to give whatever they say, whatever they want to do is fine, and you have to love them for it, whatever,
Yeah, acquiesce, acceptance, tolerance, affirming, right? So that's the kind of living in this affirming world where it's not like one group of people only. Mm-hmm. I say that specifically because that tends to be a phrase used in like the LGBT community, right? Open and affirming. That happened. That was going on way before that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were already on that path, which is why that has become such a powerful movement, I think, is, well, you're open and affirming to everybody else. Why not us? And I think the LGBT community should receive an awful lot more compassion from Christians than they have. I'm saying we still, if we got kids and we got communities of faith, like, we're going to call people on things, we got to start with what we got. And there's an awful lot to deal with before we deal with those questions. Mm-hmm. Right? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, have we beaten this to death yet? It's
probably.
It's been a while. We could talk more. I would encourage people to read the book again, read the chapter, 12 Rules for Life. Let's see, can I get that on the screen there? Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. And while you're at it, you get that on Amazon. You can also get Nola's Icelandic Adventure, Nobody's Nola, the Tales of Nola series, and this book here, Open Arms, Connecting People to Jesus. If you're looking for a way to reach people with the good news of Jesus, check it out. Let us know what you think, and hopefully it will help spread the good news, help transform this world. One of the pieces of that puzzle, though, is ARMS is an acronym: available, relational, moved or motivated, and support it, accountability. You need somebody who's going to ask you, hey, how's it going? Reaching people where you live, work, and play with the good news, developing a relationship with people. If nobody's asking you that, you won't do it. We need it as much as kids need it in the Christian life. That was the Bible passage from Hebrews 12, right? So I'm just trying to wrap it all up in a bow. And
there you go. That's very good.
Any final thoughts?
Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, I forgot. We came to you a little bit earlier instead of Wednesday. I won't bore you with that whole story right now, but yeah, Tuesday. Hopefully, we'll find a regular pattern for this at some point and stick to it. But happy Tuesday to you. Have a great Wednesday. And, of course, the rest of the week and weekend, shortened week. Enjoy it while you can. And don't forget that the Lord is good. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Ice cream is sweet. Jesus is far sweeter. Later.